So we just got the news that the second Matt Reeves Batman film has been delayed by another year, with its release date set to 2027, which is such a long way and honestly very disappointing. But as we stand, we still don't know much about this movie, and the main thing everyone is interested in is who the main villain is going to be in the Batman 2. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down all the options of who are the likely candidates and my thoughts on these characters. We don't know much information about this at the moment, but we do have some hints and rumours online on who it could be. Before we go through the list of candidates, I will say I don't think the Riddler will appear in this film. I think it's pretty obvious he's not going to be the main villain or even play any kind of role in the film, as he's currently in Arkham. And to be honest, I am glad, as just in general I wasn't the biggest fan of this Riddler. So let's move on to the first villain, who's very unlikely to be the main villain but is still worth a mention, the Penguin. Now first of all, we do know the Penguin is going to be in Batman 2, and this has been confirmed, but it's only confirmed that he's going to appear in 5 to 6 scenes. And this makes sense, as in Batman 1, he was the side villain, and he's literally just had a whole series based around him. As much as I love the series and think he's going to be great in Batman 2, I wouldn't want to see him as the main villain. I think the Penguin is going to play a similar role as he did in the first movie, with him being more of a supporting villain. One thing I do look forward to is the relationship between Batman and the Penguin, as in the first movie, the Penguin was kind of like a low-level criminal, just serving the Carmine family, but now after the series we've just seen, he's more of a complete mob boss that basically runs the street of Gotham, and we know from the cliffhanger in the end of the series that the Penguin is on Batman's radar. The Penguin is a great character, and after his recent performance in the Penguin series, I would put him on the same level as other classic Batman villains like Heath Ledger's Joker, and I think this series did a great job of showing us more of Batman's world and Gotham without showing us the Bat himself. Another reason why I wouldn't want to see Penguin as the main villain, even though he is a crime lord now, is he's still not a match for Batman in one-on-one combat. I think in this film having a villain which is a physical challenge for Batman would be good and really raise the stakes for the Batman. We also know that Penguin is to appear in the third Batman film as well, and potentially we might see a season 2 of the Penguin coming out between films 2 and 3, so we're going to be seeing a lot more of this character anyway. I think it would be good to get someone else as the main villain in the second film. The second potential villain is the Joker. Now I don't think we will see the Joker as the main villain for this film, but it is a possibility. I know there was a deleted scene of the Joker in the first Batman, but Matt Reeves even confirmed that this wasn't to tease the Joker for the next film, just to showcase that the Batman already had a background with this character. Now, I do love the Joker as a villain, and I also love Barry as an actor, but the only reason I wouldn't want to see the Joker is because I feel like we've seen the Joker as the main villain Batman's alterations already. Not only has he been the main villain for 2 live-action films, but we've also seen him as the main villain in a lot of animated series, and even the Arkham games. After Heath Ledger's amazing performance, I do also think it's going to be really hard to top this. I'm not opposed to seeing the Joker again, I just think there's so many other villains that we haven't seen in live action yet that would be great to explore. However, the fact that we have seen him in the universe means there is a strong chance he will at least make an appearance in the second and third movie, and that the deleted scene at the end of the movie was to introduce him as a character to lead up to the finale in the third film. Another option is that we see another deleted scene or a post-credit scene of the Joker in the second film, and that he's the main villain in the third film, but that's just a thought. The next candidate is Hush. So Hush is a villain we haven't seen in live action, but is a very likely candidate for the main villain in this film. Real name Thomas Elliot, Hush had a similar backstory to Bruce Wayne, both of them being from wealthy families. Elliot tried to kill his parents so he could inherit their fortune, and when his plan failed, due partly to the surgical skills of Bruce's father, Dr. Thomas Wayne, Elliot blamed Bruce. Elliot planned revenge on Wayne, and then ended up wrapping his face in bandages and going by the name Hush. One thing that makes Hush such a great villain is that he knows Batman's identity, so if he appeared in the film, we would have to see how Bruce Wayne navigates his threat. I think he would be a great villain to bring Robert Pattinson out of his shell, as we didn't get to see much of Bruce Wayne's character in the first film. I do think Hush could work in this Batman film. Just for the nature of the films being more grounded, Hush would definitely suit them. And even the backstory itself would be great to explore, especially as we haven't seen Hush on live TV yet. One big reservation I do have against Hush is just his similarity to the Riddler. Being both mass serial killers that have a vendetta against the Waynes, I feel as it's quite similar to the first villain. And don't get me wrong, Hush would be more of a physical challenge for Batman than Riddler was, and there was definitely more storylines to explore with Hush. I just would like to see some other villains over Hush personally in the second film. Obviously there was a big Easter egg in the first Batman film that teased Hush, and this doesn't necessarily mean that it's a teaser that we're going to see him in the second film. It could just be a reference to the character. It would definitely be good to see Hush in a film at some point, and I think he would definitely work as like a supporting villain, but as a main villain there are others I'd rather see over Hush, as I think he is quite similar to the Riddler. So on to the next candidate, Mr. Freeze. Now Mr. Freeze is another highly anticipated villain to show up in the second Batman film, and probably the character I personally would want to show up the most. And Mr. Freeze has a unique backstory. Dr. Victor Fries was two-time Olympic decathlon and a very well-known scientist who won the Nobel Prize in the field of molecular biology. At some point in Victor's life, he met and married Nora, and the two were deeply devoted to each other. However, Nora began to suffer from terminal illness that was called McGregor's syndrome, that would eventually lead to kill her. Victor placed Nora in an experimental tank of his own invention and hoped to keep it in suspended animation until he could find a cure. He continued his research on the disease while his wife endured her frozen slumber and even managed to cure the disease in its early stages. During the experiment, an explosion caused Victor to fall into a vat of his machine's cryofluid that was 50 degrees below zero. Victor somehow survived, but the chemicals mutated his body and left him incapable of surviving outside of temperatures below freezing point. Victor then had to develop a cryosuit that used diamond-enhanced lasers to keep him at 0 degrees. He then took up the persona of Mr. Freeze. What I like about Freeze is that he has a deeper backstory, which makes him different to a lot of other villains who are just serial killers. This gives Freeze more meaning and could create a great storyline surrounding Freeze and his emotions. As a character, we haven't seen Freeze being portrayed in a great way in the Batman movie. Of course there was Batman Forever, but this just wasn't a great portrayal of the character in my opinion. But because it was so long ago, I'm not going to be too harsh about it. One hint that it might be Mr. Freeze is that the film takes place during wintertime. Mr. Freeze is a character who has a big metal suit of armor to keep him cool and is known for his iconic freeze gun as his main weapon. I'm not sure how this sort of thing would play out in the Matt Reeves universe, where it does seem like more of a darker, grounded, realistic world, where I think it'd be quite hard to imagine Mr. Freeze. Either way, I think this change of villain in comparison to the Riddler would be very refreshing for the films. There's so much depth to Mr. Freeze, and I do believe he's one of the more unique villains in Batman's rogue gallery. Batman 1 was great, but one thing I think they should show us in the villain is more of a deeper, emotional driven side. Villains we end up sympathizing with but still have an evil side usually can create some of the best antagonists. One theory I did see online is that Vic from the Penguin series could be Mr. Freeze, just because his name was Vic. But to be honest, I highly doubt this, and I don't think this character would be a great fit for that either. Either way, I do think there's a good chance that we'll see Mr. Freeze, and I think Mr. Freeze, personally, would be my favourite villain. The next likely candidate is Clayface. Now, Clayface is another villain we haven't seen in live-action movie yet, which is why I'd be super excited to see him. Clayface is one of Batman's oldest villains, first appearing in the comics in the 1940s. Basil Karlo, the original Clayface, was an actor who was driven mad when he heard of the remake of the classic horror film he had starred in, The Terror. Adopting the persona of the film's villain Clayface, he became a serial killer targeting the cast and crew, who was eventually stopped by Batman and Robin. Later, Carla would be imbued by the powers of Clayface's Preston Payne and Sandra Fuller. Additionally, his body sports crystals similar to quartz that endued him with greater powers. Clayface does appear in the Batman. I presume it would be the older version of the character instead of the version of Clayface we see in the most recent series of Batman, where he's able to shapeshift and essentially turn into every item. The problem with the most modern version of Clayface is that it doesn't really fit into the realism of Reeves' Batman universe, and the realism of Matt Reeves' Batman universe is what works so well in the first one and what people loved about it. So he might be more skeptical about moving away from this in the second film. But even if the more fantastical versions of Clayface from the recent DC comics and series were adapted, the character could still work as Batman 2's villain. The recent iterations of the character include powers that could allow him to change his body at will, take its clay-like structure, with some recent versions of Clayface allowing him to completely mimic other people. If this version of Clayface was adapted in Batman 2, Reeves could choose to take the horror route with the character and turn what could have been silly into a terrifying horror-based antagonist. Personally, despite not fitting in with Batman 2's style, I do think it would be pretty cool to see this character, as I think he would be both a mental and physical threat to Batman. This would make Batman way more paranoid, and it'd be very difficult for him to catch Clayface, meaning he would have to tap into his detective skills. However, if we did see Clayface, I do have a feeling we would see an earlier version of the character. But just like Hush, the earlier version of the character is more of like a generic serial killer, and again doesn't massively differ from the Riddler. I do think it would be good to have some different styles of villains show up on the big screen. I definitely think Clayface could also work as a good supporting villain along with someone else, as we don't really need to see Clayface's backstory to be introduced to the character, but I do think he would put Batman to the test. One hint we got towards Clayface, which might be a bit of a reach, was in the recent Penguin series with the background character Eve. Eve was a relatively minor character throughout the series. She was a sex worker who protected herself and her fellow workers by cozying up to Oz. In exchange, she became whoever Oz wanted her to be, even looking like the mother at the end of the show. Despite being a minor character, Eve may be the key to Clayface's entry to the Reeves universe. Eve's last name is Carlo, potentially being an Easter egg connecting Eve Carlo to the original Clayface Basil Carlo. Now this could be an Easter egg, or it could just be completely coincidence. This could either be hinting to Clayface, or hinting Eve could be Clayface herself. Another reason why this might be the case that she is Clayface is that she was actually in the final scene with the Penguin. There is a chance we could see her in the movies as well, just as a character, alongside Penguin. But I do think there is a possibility we could see Clayface. The next possible candidate is Scarecrow. Scarecrow, also known as Jonathan Crane, was a professor of psychology who turned into a criminal mastermind who became obsessed with creating hallucinogenic drugs, and then named one the fear toxin. Now, Scarecrow, in my opinion, would be a really good fit into this universe. His scary, horror-themed approach would fit perfectly into this film, and I think it would be a great step up from the Riddler. We have seen Scarecrow before in the Dark Knight trilogy, played by the amazing Cillian Murphy, who's one of my favourite actors, but we didn't have that much screen time, and I think there is definitely more room to explore this character. This fits perfectly with the storyline of the Penguin, with a new drug being put into Gotham. There is potential for Scarecrow to join the story, and I'd personally be really happy if we saw a version of Scarecrow here. What makes Scarecrow unique is his crimes don't desire power or wealth, but it seeks the pleasure in subjecting others to his manipulation and his fear. I like Scarecrow as a villain, and I think he's one of the most scariest villains out of Batman's Rogues Gallery. So I wouldn't be surprised if he turned up in this film. Now, we did get a Scarecrow Easter egg in the Penguin as well, and drugs was a big theme in the Penguin series. So these could be hints to him possibly showing up in the second movie. Now on to our final two candidates. Firstly, we have the Court of Owls. Court of Owls is something I probably know the least about, but are the secret society of wealthy families in Gotham City who use their influence to control the city for centuries. They originated in the early days of Gotham when a small group of aristocrats formed the society. One thing I think that would make the Court of Owls such a good opponent is that they already run Gotham without Bruce knowing. It's hard to tell how the Court of Owls will be portrayed, as we haven't seen much of them at all. Their main appearances have been in the comics, but also in the film Batman v Robin, and in that film they put Batman to the test massively. I do also think that they would fit in with the theme, as Penguin currently has a lot of power within the city, so there could be potential storylines there for the Court of Owls and Penguin to work together. There were also a few Easter eggs for the Court of Owls and the Penguin, but to be honest, I do think these are quite coincidental, but who knows. I do think this is a different type of villain, just for the fact that we haven't seen a group villain like this before. We've seen main characters who have led gangs and entourages, just like the Penguin did in Batman Return, or the Joker did in The Dark Knight Rises, but we haven't seen a group of villains on this level who hold a lot of power, and this would be completely different. I also think the storyline of a group who runs Gotham being corrupt is a great storyline to explore, as we haven't seen this kind of higher level corruption in Gotham in any of the movies yet to this scale. I also think because there's so many of them, it would be a real challenge for Batman to defeat these, as he couldn't literally take down every single person in the group himself. Now last but not least, we have Two-Face, aka Harvey Dent. So far, we've seen Harvey Dent quite a few times in the Batman universe, and has proved himself as quite a challenge for Batman. Even though he doesn't have any superpowers or weapons, he seems to be a genuine challenge for the Bat. Having a grounded, fully fledged Two-Face would fit in great to this universe, and one thing I love about Two-Face is that he really works well paired with another criminal. We've seen Two-Face being played by Aaron Eckhart in The Dark Knight, Tommy Lee Jones in Batman Forever, and Harry Lawley as a version of Harvey in the new Joker film. Even though Tommy Lee Jones wasn't my favourite, I thought him and Aaron Eckhart's performance worked really well as a side villain alongside a main villain. This villain, like others, is heavily rumoured to make a potential appearance in the second Batman film. But to be honest, I'm not too keen on seeing this character over some of the others, as because we've already seen him twice in two other movies, and again, I'd like to see someone that we haven't seen in another film before. But there we have it. They're all the characters that I believe could show up as the main villain in the second Batman film. One thing I do like about the Batman films in general is they don't hesitate to put 2 or even 3 villains in one film, and I think this works really well. We know Penguin is definitely going to appear in the movie, and it's probably going to be labelled as some sort of a villain, but whether we just get one more villain or 2 more, that's still a mystery. Batman has by far one of the best rogues galleries, so it is likely we could see some other villains outside of the ones I've mentioned today. We have villains such as Bane, Ra's al Ghul, Poison Ivy, Man-Bat, Black Mask, Hugo Strange, and many more. Even though I haven't mentioned these today, there is obviously still a big possibility we could see any of these characters. I think maybe a character such as Black Mask or even Hugo Strange appearing in this universe is probably likely at some point, especially because we've got Batman 2 and Batman 3 both coming out. There is an opportunity to display a lot more characters. To me, the villains is what make the Batman films so good. But who do you think will appear in this movie? And let me know your thoughts down below in the comments.